All right, welcome to another episode of Medicine Mondays. I am yours truly, Dr. Pierre, your favorite board certified internist, host of Medicine Mondays, our weekly YouTube series where we bring you the most up to date health information, as well as bring some phenomenal guests from time to time, as well as our other YouTube series and actually a live YouTube series, Real Physician Reacts, where I go in and I kind of talk about a social media post I see, a video post that I see, and I just kind of go in depth on, what my personal point of view is. And again, thank you for tuning in to another week of Medicine Mondays. This week, we are going to be talking about my love and hate relationship with the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control. And it is one, obviously, if you heard, this is your first time listening or watching this series or listening to any of my content, you know that I quote the CDC a lot because it is such a significant governing body, especially in the field of public health. I am not only am I an osteopathic physician, but I have my master's in public health degree. And with that, have such a different outlook when it comes to disease prevention, just taking care of patients. Since getting my public health, I've said this before on record, that getting that public health degree has made me a more proficient and more well-rounded, empathetic physician because I realized that it isn't just about the one person sitting in front of me. It's about the group. It's about the whole and how that whole, levels of society and everything else can affect the one person that happens to be sitting in front of me. So I want to talk about one. Let's give a quick little breakdown of what the CDC is, and then we're going to be talking about why I have this kind of push-pull love and hate relationship. Now, many of you are extremely familiar with the CDC, especially depending if you're watching this, at the time I dropped this, the CDC has kind of been our governing body per se, right? I don't say governing body, but it's been kind of the soundboard, especially when it comes to COVID-19 and COVID-19 recommendations, COVID-19, restrictions. It's been in that sounding board. It's been the one thing that people typically refer to. And that's been great. But unfortunately, throughout this whole entire process, there's been some missteps, there's been some misspeak, there's even been a little bit of controversy. And I want to kind of talk about the controversy and how that's kind of really affected me as a public health professional, as a physician, one who's been having to take care of patients with COVID-19, affected with COVID-19 at pretty much all different levels. Again, I take care of patients in an outpatient setting, right? When they get sick, they get COVID, they call me. I take care of patients inside the acute care center of the hospital. I take care of patients in our long-term care facilities, as well as rehab. So I take care of patients at different levels who've been stricken with COVID-19. So I've seen the effects, from A to Z, right? And I've seen what COVID-19 has done over these past 2+ years. And I would love to say that I wish that every step of the way the CDC was right with me and was right with, and by me, with most of my colleagues, as far as kind of giving the right information, making it easy for us and for the public to digest. But unfortunately, that has not been the case. So let's give a quick little, I just want a quick little, a textbook definition of CDC. That way we all can kind of wrap our heads around it. CDC is the National Public Health Agency of the United States, under the Department of Health and Human Services, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. The main goal is the protection of public health and safety through the control and prevention of disease, injury, and disability in the United States and worldwide. The CDC focuses national attention on developing and applying disease control and prevention. It especially focuses attention on infectious disease, aka COVID-19, foodborne pathogens, environmental health, occupational safety and health promotion, injury prevention, education activities designed to improve the health of the United States citizens, right? And so again, when we talk about the CDC, many of you have come across the teachings and the announcements and everything from the CDC standpoint. Like you have heard where, they say, hey, don't eat lettuce from a specific restaurant because there's an outbreak, we notice, right? And at the second you hear anything in that regards, you come to a complete stop and you stop eating that lettuce at that specific restaurant because, hey, you have this governing body again that's really our national public health arm that says, hey, we're noticing an infection coming from specifically from a type of food, specifically from a type of restaurant. Don't eat it, right? And because you hear that, because you know that, you kind of fall in tension. But what I've seen, especially over these 2+ years, is that now when the CDC kind of gives recommendations on COVID-19, there's kind of this level of distrust and dismay with what the CDC says. And again, I'm not here to tell you and here to champion that the CDC has done everything 100% correct or said it correctly. Right? I think, me personally, I think as a physician, one of the biggest issues the CDC has is that its messaging has sometimes been off and really not really congruent with what kind of the general population is thinking. And I think just that level of confusion that we've seen has caused some mistrust. And I'm not talking about the people who've always mistrusted the CDC specifically. And I want to say this because I mentioned like that lettuce example. Typically, when the CDC says, hey, stop eating that lettuce, I don't see too many people fighting to eat that lettuce, right? You don't see people say like, oh, no. The CDC says that. I don't believe the CDC. I'm still going to eat that lettuce. You don't really see that occur. But when it comes to kind of vaccine prevention, especially in regards to disease process, now when the CDC says something, you have some people who are staunchly like, oh my God, I'm not listening to nothing the CDC says, right? Like everything the CDC says is a lie. And I think that comes from one, there's some people who just mistrust government. We 100% understand that. As a physician, I've taken care of patients. I'm on social media. I've seen the comments. I've seen people comment. I've seen the people who have a distrust for big government and government in general. Okay, got that. It's those who have a sense of mistrust in the government that's really not based on anything factual. Those are the ones that are a little difficult, right? Because again, how can you argue with someone whose basis is, foundationally a lie? Right? You really can't do that, right? And as a health professional, as a physician, one who's on social media educating as much as I can, I've learned to kind of navigate with people who, yes, I can educate and get them to the truth, and those who are so fixated on the foundation of lies that you're not going to shake them, right? It's much easier. I just got to go this way. Let that person kind of live on that lifeboat over there. But like as we come up on the 2-year anniversary, right? And I want to kind of highlight. A timeline, that the CDC has, right? So as we come up on a 2-year anniversary of the CDC, right, in terms of first recognizing, right, the first U.S. laboratory confirmed case of COVID-19 here in the United States occurred January 18th, right? Like they took it on January 18th, they confirmed it on the 20th, right? So we're coming up on 2 years, depending on when you listen to this episode, when we first say, hey, you know what? COVID is here. Not necessarily COVID is alive, because that was done earlier, but like COVID is here. January 20th was the first time we kind of diagnosed our first case here. And unfortunately, right, with over 800,000 deaths later since January 20th, COVID is still here alive and well. I implore you, if you have not had a chance, make sure you check out last week's episode of Medicine Mondays, where I kind of talked about the Omicron variant. I kind of gave an update on some of those numbers there, because it's like I said, it's sad to hear. So we're coming up on a time frame where dealing with COVID and dealing with another wave, right? I was hoping, right? I was optimistic last year that, I think by the end of 2021, we could be turning a corner. Unfortunately, by the end of 2021, it looks like we're going right back up another hill, and this hill happens to be much higher than before. Now, given that information, right, given the fact that we are going through another subsequent wave of infections, of hospitalizations, of deaths, given all of that, what has really, wanted me to pull my hair out, especially when dealing with the CDC, is that what they noticed is that, hey, you know what? Let's go back on some of our claims, right? Let's go back on some of the restrictions. I don't want to say restrictions, but essentially the restrictions that we had for these patients here, because what we see now with the CDC as far as quarantine and isolation has gotten a lot of my colleagues furious, because what's starting to occur is that, again, cases are going up, infections are going up, hospitalizations are going up. And what the CDC says is, what? We initially recommended you guys, stay home for about 10 days. But let's cut it down to 5. And I mind you, the CDC is not alone on this, right? When you look at some of the sporting agencies, NFL, NBA, all of a sudden they're starting to revise, their quarantine restrictions, their isolation restrictions. They're starting to revise those things. And when you hear what the CDC says, right? Again, like I said, good intentions. They say, hey, you know what? Based off the information that we have, based off, the treatment options available, we don't think you need to stay quarantined for as long, right? And again, I'll kind of read up on, what our CDC wants us to do now. So CDC says, if you test positive for COVID-19, everyone, regardless of vaccination status, should stay home for 5 days, right? And again, that's a decrease. And mind you, I just said that our cases are running up. If you have no symptoms or your symptoms are resolving after 5 days, you can leave your house and you can continue to wear a mask around others for an additional 5 days. If you have a fever, continue to stay home until your fever resolves. Right? Like that's been the biggest change in the isolation protocol, quarantine protocol that the CDC dropped on us. And it hit a lot of healthcare professionals like a ton of bricks, because here we are having to deal with another subsequent wave. And in the middle of the wave, not even in the middle, I'm sorry, I can't even say the middle. The wave is really about to start climbing. In the middle of the climbing of the wave, you say, hey, you know what? We need to get people. This is what people are interpreting. We need to get people back to work. We need to get people back outside. And because we need to get that sooner than later, let's reduce the amount of time. And of course, what happens, right? If the sporting agency, CDC, recommend less days, guess what? They're going to tell their players, hey, you can, you don't have to stay away from us as many days as you did before, right? So it's going to be a significant domino effect that's going to transpire. And what a lot of our colleagues feel, and we've always felt that at times the CDC does not necessarily have the people's interest at hand, but more kind of more of a business-like approach. Like, hey, things need to open up, things need to stay open, so we need people back. And as again, I've been dealing with having to defend what the CDC says. I've been dealing with having to defend what the CDC meant. And of course, it doesn't make it any easier, right? Because when I talk about those anti-government people, right? Like, this is all they need. Like, yeah, you see, look, they can't even agree to agree, right? Like, we don't need this level of discourse happening, especially while we're still in the pandemic. But here it is. And as a physician, I don't agree, right? I don't agree that going, having less quarantine days makes any sense, especially as the wave is shooting up, right? Like, if you would have told me cases are going down, infections are going down, deaths are if you would have told me we were going in the right direction, okay, I can listen to a conversation that says, hey, you know what, if you're vaccinated, right? Because again, this is one thing I don't necessarily, as you see when it said regardless of your vaccination status, I feel like if you're going to have, a withdrawal, right, of where you are, a pullback, right? If you're going to have a pullback of what your initial isolation restrictions were, you have to give the benefit of the people who happen to be vaccinated. Like, you can't be like, oh, if you're regardless of your vaccination status, everyone comes back after 5 days. No, that doesn't make any sense. Because again, what you do, right? You now incentivize people to say, hey, like, why do I need to get vaccinated if whether I get vaccinated or not, I just have to stay away for 5 days and I'm good to go, right? Like you're not incentivizing what needs to be incentivized, which is prevention. Which here you'll hear on my show, any other show, where when we talking about vaccines, right? When we're talking about diseases, prevention is always going to be recommended rather than treatment. Like that, we're never going to I'm never going to recommend, oh, you know what, just go ahead and get the newest drugs by Merck and who's our other one, Pfizer, right? Like if you happen to get the virus, right? Or just go to the hospital, get remdesivir and some steroids. I'm never going to say that is what you should be going for. I'm always going to say, hey, this is, what, I would try to avoid it. Meaning I would social distance as much as possible. I would wear a mask as much as possible. And more importantly, I would get vaccinated. And now, especially because of, again, I talk about this wave that we're dealing with, especially with Omicron, like I would get boosted as well. So if you already been vaccinated, and you're eligible to get boosted, go get the booster as well. So that's where my train of thought is. And as a public health professional, as a physician, I have to continue to champion that. So even when I talk to my friends and my family and they ask me, hey, what do you think about this new recommendation? I say, hey, you know what? I'll be honest. I don't agree. I don't agree that going down on the quarantine days makes any sense, especially, again, I've said this before, especially if you're not vaccinated. If you are not vaccinated, you can't tell me that, you should have really the same privileges, right, as a person who's vaccinated. I'm just sorry. I'll just be honest. I'll say it here, throw your tomatoes. But when we are trying to, especially, get over, right, when we're trying to battle through this pandemic, which we've been losing terribly. Again, we're going on calendar year number 3, right? COVID-19 was obviously, as the 19 suggests, was first diagnosed in 2019. We're going in the year 2022 now, still dealing with COVID-19, still having really no way to corral its variants, its disease process. We're still dealing with the immense pressure of increased hospitalizations, increased ER visits, right? Elective surgeries being canceled everywhere. And at a time like this, we don't need the governing body, aka the CDC, sending out these mixed messages, that make it harder, right, for people like me to get on here and tell y'all, what you should be doing and not doing, right? It just is what it is, right? And again, like I said, when I'm talking to patients and I'm just kind of on here online, the CDC is always going to be a source of information that I recommend. I say, hey, this is where if you, especially for the patient, because the CDC does a great job breaking down information on disease process that, a normal Joe Blow person can read. So I love sending my patients to read, hey, this article's on CDC on this disease. Go ahead and read that. I love doing it because they do such a great job, talking in terms that a patient, right, who isn't necessarily medically inclined can understand. But unfortunately, what they've done, right, when we talk about breakthrough diseases, right, we've said this before. We had Dr. Cynthia on here who kind of stated the point that the term breakthrough disease is more of a media term more than anything else, right? Because breakthrough, again, and I'll put myself in the seat, right, or in the mind of those who are completely against vaccines and completely against the government anyway. Like when they hear breakthrough, they're hearing, oh, I got the vaccine and I still ended up getting the virus COVID-19, which means the vaccine doesn't work, right? So when they hear breakthrough, that's what they're saying. Right. But in the terms of the CDC public health, it was really just a way to measure, say, hey, those who get COVID-19, test positive COVID-19, who happen to have already gotten the vaccine. That was really the measure. But people will equate and try to kind of combine like, hey, look, this is a person got a breakthrough disease, which means the vaccine did not work. And if you understand, and I've said this before countless times, right from the beginning, this vaccine was never, ever supposed to prevent you from getting COVID-19. It was always, and you've especially if you watch my show, you listen to my podcast, I've said this kind of verbatim. The goal was always to prevent you from seeing me in a hospital and or dying. That's always been the goal of vaccines. can I reduce your chance of seeing Dr. Pierre in the hospital or dying from COVID-19? And we know far out that clearly that answer is yes, like 100%. Because even as we go through these peaks and waves, as we went through with Delta, as we will go through with Omicron, we will see that the majority of cases will tend to be people who are unvaccinated. It just is what it is. Don't fight me, fight the numbers, right? So, and I'm talking to my anti-vax folks. Fight the numbers. Don't argue with me. Nothing you can say here. So when you have that, right, our governing body really has to be kind of like on right with us, right? You got to be right with us, or then you have me and a lot of my other colleagues having to, publicly challenge, like, hey, guys, like, I hear what the CDC is saying, but that's not it, right? That's not it. That's not what we're going to recommend. So again, as we come up on year two, right? Year two of our first case of COVID-19, right? And again, let me just just for real time's sake, just so we can get an adequate number. Right now, as we come up on year two, we are crossing 60 million, right? 60 million.2 to be exact. Wait, 60 million cases of COVID-19 since it was first confirmed here in the United States 2 years ago, right? It's which is sad, right? And 836,000 deaths, right? Just crazy numbers. But all we can do, right? Again, all we can do is say is that as someone who's on the front lines, like I need those who are the governing body, those who are the media southpiece for the United States, and who what everyone, whether they like them or dislike them, tends to follow, right? I kind of need them to kind of be more realistic and be kind of, hands on the ground with these recommendations, right? Like if it's one thing I can go back and at the start of this pandemic, I just wish their messaging was better. Like that's really what it is, right? Like again, what they're saying, isn't it isn't wrong, but it's the way they present the message that causes that confusion. And in business we talk, a confused buyer, a confused customer is not a buyer, right? Like they don't, like if someone is confused at your message, right? If your message is to get vaccinated, but you're saying, hey, it doesn't matter if you're vaccinated, if you get sick, stay away for 5 days, then come right back to work because we can't afford you to be in. Like if your message is that, you're gonna lose a lot of people, right? And you're gonna lose that trust, right? And like here on the Lunch Learn with Dr. Barry, Medicine Mondays, our goal is to continue to establish, trust within the healthcare system, because once you trust the healthcare system, then, when we give, our concerns, when we give our guidelines, when we give our recommendations, you're more likely to follow them. That's all I got to say, right? So again, I'm yours truly, Dr. Pierre. Again, I want to thank you guys. Again, we are going on year two of this pandemic. For those who are watching this, listening to this, and have lost family members, right? It's, my heart goes out to you because I know, right? I know that I hope that there wasn't any misinformation or even disinformation that got to your family members that caused their death, right? Because again, I talked about it, we got 836,000 deaths. I wish I could say that we could prevent all of them, but that's not true. But I know that there is some of those 836,000 that could have been prevented if the right information was brought to them, if they weren't confused, if they weren't kind of back and forth. I just know it is because like I've said, I've taken care of those patients, right? I've taken care of a patient in the hospital about to be intubated, understanding that likely they were never not going to be extubated, and having those conversations with them and saying, man, I wish I got vaccinated, right? Like I've been there, right? And I've FaceTime families as they had to say goodbye to their loved ones, right? I've been there. I'm going to continue to be there because again, right now, pandemic is still here, still running, still kicking. All we can do, right? All we can do, especially as here on Lunch and Learn, all we can do is provide you guys with the most clearest message around. And if anytime there's any confusion, because I'll do it anytime. Anytime I see there's any confusion from the top, I will make sure to get on live, get on the video, get on the podcast and say like, hey, like I hear what they're saying over there, but this is what they really mean, and this is what we want you guys to get from it, right? So this is your truly Dr. Pierre again, thanking you again for just listening, right, or watching, depending on where you're getting this. You guys be blessed, and I'm gonna see you next week.